Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. There's one caveat to what Robin said about not talking during my presentation or other speakers, and that is if you want to comment to your neighbor how good looking I am or how well I'm speaking, feel free to go ahead. All other negative comments keep to yourself. Okay. First of all, greetings from the Department of Veterans Affairs. I've been working for them for some time now, since 1980. And there were many years when I would never tell anybody I was in recovery, especially my colleagues, fearing the stigma and the rejection that I felt that they would have for my point of view or any program initiatives that I wanted to bring to the VA. So I certainly understand people's resistance to a bureaucracy that is probably one of the most traditional medically model-oriented systems anywhere. And I just want to say that there were days, or actually I never wanted to go to work for the VA. I'm a Vietnam-era veteran. And if you recall, in the 70s, returnees from Vietnam, the vets that came home, they weren't welcomed in many places, even their own VA. And at that time, the medical experts said there was no such thing as post-traumatic stress disorder. And veterans who had seen and done horrible things and did not know how to deal with the moral disabilities, the psychological traumas, all of that stuff, they were told it doesn't exist, go elsewhere. So I didn't want to have anything to do with the VA when I first started working there. But they asked me to come. I had been an intern there. Some things were going on in our community with substance abuse, where veterans were being rejected from the VA, told to go to another hospital. And I felt that I might be able to do something about that. So I went to the VA, and it's been many days of beating my head against a wall. Many days I feel like not going back. But you can, consider, I started there in 1980, so it's like 35 years. So I must either like beating my head against a wall, or there must be something else going on. And I like to believe there's something else going on, because if everybody who had disagreements and didn't totally believe in something walked away from what that organization, that system was doing, it would never change. And that's Robin threw out a gem last night when she talked to us about expecting the systems that we may have been abused by or traumatized to be able to recover in the same way. We ask that system to believe in recovery for everybody who has a mental health condition. So anyway, that's why I work for the VA, and that wasn't in my talk this morning, but there it is. So anyway, let's start with this picture on my opening slide. I'm talking about life after trauma today, and this is a picture of a sewer drain that I walk by every day when I'm walking my dog. When I first saw the leaves growing, I thought, what kind of weed, what kind of ugly thing is this going to end up being? And every day I would go by, and then one day, surprise, beautiful flowers. Not unlike many of us, beauty can emerge from dark and desolate challenges. Okay, now for your morning laugh. Thought I'd share some breakfast buns with you all. I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV, but I thought all of us are looking for medical consultants and helpers who can relate to us. So I think this is a good example of what we'd like to see. Well, maybe not all of it, but the attitude anyway. So, I want to discuss the definition of traumas. Medical definition, a serious injury to a person's body. Now, I'll give you an example. I think you probably all have one, but this one happened to me when I was 10 years old. I was doing what every other 10-year-old boy does when their mom goes shopping and leaves them with the babysitter upstairs, who was our landlady. And I had a poker game going in the kitchen with my neighborhood friends. And when I heard the landlady walking across the floor to come down the front steps, I knew she was coming down to check on me. So I ran full speed toward the front doors, and we had these double pane doors. There was a wooden strip in the middle and two big windows on each side. And I went flying to slam the door shut, and I missed the wood. Went through the window, tore up my arm underneath, and glass fell and cut my wrist. It actually looks like I have slit my wrist, but this was a result of an accident. And the blood was everywhere, and luckily the guy, the adult son of the landlady upstairs, took me to a hospital immediately, and a surgeon was able to save my arm because it's pretty bad. I have like 52 stitches, and anyway, that's an example of a physical trauma. But good news is I can still do this. Not much there to do it with, but, testosterone's going, and what can I say? Psychological trauma is a very difficult or unpleasant experience that causes someone to have mental or emotional problems, usually for a long time. And then there's military post-traumatic stress. And I don't use the word disorder unless I have to, because my personal opinion is that post-traumatic stress is not a disorder. It's a natural reaction to a horrible situation that happens to somebody. So, life after trauma, I think you all know what life is. You're all sitting here eating, breathing, and you know what life is. But basically, it really is about being in the now, experiencing different stimuli that come in. When I'm speaking to you, that's a stimulus. You're hearing things, whatever. There's involuntary, voluntary, autonomic. You guys are eating. You're not deciding how to digest your food. It's just happening. It's going down, and later it's going to come out. But it's all happening, and all is good. There are some other things that we do voluntarily that I believe, and there are some research studies to support this, that things that we think about and things that we do, behaviors, repetitively over time can actually change chemicals and stuff in our bodies and in our minds, and then it can become what we would believe is involuntary because it's so automatic. And it takes a lot of work to change those things again. Let me, talk about, again, my own personal experience growing up. My father had PTS from World War II. He was in Okinawa and was involved in hand-to-hand combat with the Japanese. And he escaped from an attack in which his close buddy was killed along with other men in his company. He never talked about how he escaped. I don't know if he had to kill or, I would imagine, in bayonet, close quarter fighting. He had to harm or kill others to get away. He never talked about it. I don't know if he ran away. I don't know if he just skedaddled as soon as he could when he saw him coming, but I know that it left the same kind of scars that I have on my arm happen in a person's psychological realm. And though you can't see them, they're there. You can't see this. And I want to also say that this doesn't hurt anymore, and I can move. I have a fully functional arm, but the scar is still there. And that's true for us psychologically, too. We can be healed from our psychological traumas, but the scars are still there. We don't forget. They're there. So my dad also had a very abusive home life, very rigid. He was beaten mercilessly at times with leather belts and with fists. And I know that he did the best that he could in raising us and loving us. He provided a home. He was able to work despite his post-traumatic stress and anxiety disorder. And interestingly, my last name, Mazza, I combined my name with my wife's when we got married, O'Brien Mazza, but my name comes from the Italian verb mazzare, which means to bludgeon to death with a blunt instrument. I use that to my advantage sometimes when counseling big guys, But it's kind of fitting that, that this was what was going on in my family because we do have kind of an anger, hostile orientation. And some of that may be genetic as well as environmental. And I just want to say one thing about genetics, folks. I have learned in the last 3 years, due to some serious health matters that my wife has been experiencing, that if you don't know your genetics, then you don't know a whole lot about your own health. Genetics are a major factor in determining how we interact with food, with olfactory stuff, toxins, everything in our environment. And we should know about those things because it can really help us. It can change us. I see there's some workshops going on throughout the conference on the impact of diet and stuff, and it's really important. So just, there's a website called 23andMe. You can actually have your DNA tested, and you can find out relatively inexpensively. And if you have a doctor that will order the test for you, I would encourage you to understand your genetics. Anyway, growing up in my home was very, as you can imagine, very difficult and tense. My dad wouldn't let us do a lot of stuff. He was very repressive and abusive. And I inherited, or I chose to believe at that time, that when I got out of that house, nobody was ever going to tell me what to do or how to live again, because I felt so controlled and so abused that nobody was ever going to do that again to me. I also adopted my dad's attitude on life, and what he told me one day when I tried to confront him about his illogical behavior and abuse, he said, "You listen to me. Even when I'm wrong, I'm right." I thought that was the most stupid thing I ever heard. But you know the influence of your upbringing? I believed it. I knew it was illogical, but I lived that way for years and years, which led me to early alcoholism, drug abuse, anxiety disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder. And I ended up in the hospital at age 20 with my liver badly impaired, hepatitis, alcoholic hepatitis, a liver biopsy. They stuck a needle in me about that long to pull out a piece of my liver and said I was beginning cirrhosis, and if I didn't stop drinking, I would die. 9 years later, through the grace of God, I lived, and finally through AA and making a decision to turn my life and will over to the care of God as I understand Him, I became a Christian, and I have been sober for 37 years. And by the grace of God, I have been able to work my way up in the VA system, starting as a rehab counselor and helping vets find jobs, addictions counselor, mental health manager. And 8 years ago, I was blessed to be able to walk into this position. And it's been the most rewarding position I've ever had, helping veterans who have recovered help other veterans. I want to tell you about a couple of those veterans right now. A few years ago, Janelle Grimm was not a woman you would call strong, confident, or self-controlled and positive. After Janelle was discharged from the Army, where she spent a year in Korea overseas, she was at home with her husband, who left her with their 2.5-year-old son, and he moved across country with their son, and she didn't know what to do. She couldn't follow them. There was no legal recuse she could use because she was married and he was the father. So at that time, Janelle chose to abuse alcohol and drugs, and she lived a horrible life, taking irrespectable jobs. She could not do anything, really hold down a job. She was in homeless shelters, battered women's shelters. And after her second DUI, she was referred to a VA outpatient clinic where she met a drug and alcohol counselor who did not judge her. He did not scold her when she didn't show up for appointments. He accepted her and told her that one day she would get well. Keep coming back. She decided, I really want to make this clear. I hope you're hearing me when I keep saying made a decision, chose. She decided to enter a VA residential treatment program because she knew if she stayed on the outside amongst the other influences that she'd been living with, she might not stay sober and in recovery. So she stayed in this program for 9 months. During that time, she became obsessed with changing her anger and depression from destructive impulses to constructive, and she became a multiple martial arts fighter. She had 3 bouts, which she won, but then she had a big fight on a sanctioned card with the MMA, and this is the one that's on this slide, and she lost that fight, and she decided maybe she should be a peer support specialist. And we're so glad she did. But she used her own decision-making ability, the supports that she got, to have a life after trauma. Here she is now. Look at that beautiful, smiling, peaceful face. I couldn't have asked for a better picture, which she sent for this presentation. And by the way, I want to thank Janelle and the next gentleman I'm going to tell you about for giving me permission to share their stories with you all. Josh Henson, he was United States Army. He went into reserves after 9/11, 2001. He was 30 years old. He wasn't a young buck just saying, I'm going to get out there and get those guys. He wanted to protect his country. If they could come and destroy the Twin Towers, maybe they would come to his neighborhood. So he started serving in the reserves. He had a successful business. He went all over the country repairing motorcycles for professional motocross and supercross riders. And he was very successful. He wasn't running away from anything. But when he went in the reserves, he volunteered to go to Iraq. And after his first tour over there, he came back a different guy. He couldn't go out of the house. He was angry. He'd go to bars to drink. He was abusing alcohol and substances. He got in trouble. He'd end up in jail. And he was alienating. And he called it a deep, dark pit of hell that he was in. So eventually, he said, I just can't stand being a civilian. He went back in, and he volunteered to go to Iraq again, this time as an improvised explosive device hunter. In other words, he was the point guy that walked or drove a Humvee down a road and investigated any vehicles that were lying on the side of the road, any piles of scrap or whatever that could be an IED. His Humvee was hit 8 times that year. He had head injury, TBI, traumatic brain injury, back and leg injuries, post-traumatic stress. The 8th time it was hit, he could not just recover and go back to work. They sent him home. He then he lost 6 men, 6 of his close men during that year. And then when he got home, he lost 4 to suicide. This guy could have given it all up, but he didn't. Josh started, after he got recovery through the VA and became a peer specialist, started his own organization called Continuing the Mission. Josh has a life after trauma. Here he is with his wife of 21 years and their 3 adopted children. They were foster children. I can't tell you how impressed I am with a family, a couple that will take total strangers into their house, oftentimes children with a lot of baggage, a lot of trauma that they've experienced, and work with them and love them and bring them into adulthood. And guess what the oldest daughter is doing today? She's in the Army Reserves, serving her country just like her dad. So, ladies and gentlemen, is there life after trauma? You can say life after trauma as a statement, or you can ask the question, is there life after trauma? And I say resoundingly, yes. You're looking at one. You've just heard me talk about 2. But I want to tell you that the powerful actions that change a person rest in the will and decision-making ability of that person themselves, of each one of you here today. As a man or woman thinks in their heart, so they are. So, I'm just going to close with saying that I hope you all make good decisions for yourselves today. I stay sober and stay out of the hospital, and I don't have to take medications anymore, one day at a time. Doesn't mean every day is a cakewalk. There are a lot of days. I didn't sleep very well. I couldn't get to sleep last night, and had some of the same thoughts I had years and years ago, or days and days ago. But I don't act on them anymore. With my higher power, God as I understand him, Jesus, I just go one day at a time. And it's been good. I want to thank Alternatives for being here. I want to thank you for having me. And I want to wish all the peer specialists a special congratulations and recognition for the work that you do. We have 1,100 of them in the VA, and I know what a struggle it is some days to work with the mental health professionals and even clients who don't always want to be there. So thank you, everybody. Have a great conference and a great day.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing today? I am so happy to be here. I want to thank everyone for getting up early. This is usually, for the past few weeks, around the time I've been going to bed due to some of my own struggles that have been happening. So getting up early today was really hard, but it's honor and privilege for me to be able to be here with you. So I want to give you a little bit of a history about my life. I'm going to keep it real short because I have limited time. So I'm 42 years old. I live in Salem, Massachusetts, the city of misfits. I live 5 minutes from the water, which is a life-saving thing for me to be able to walk to the water whenever I need to and be healed. The salt water makes me feel great. Being out on the pier, the water, the sound of the waves, the beautiful wind and sun and stars, depending on what time I'm outside, just helps me get through the day. And I go down to the water almost every day, and it saves my life. And the past few weeks have been so debilitating for me with trauma that I've been experiencing in my own personal struggle, that being able to go to the water and have that peace has been a revolution for me. And I'm going to talk more about that in a second. So as I said, I'm 42 years old. I live in Salem. I spent most of my life diagnosed with mental health conditions I never had. As a young person in the 80s, I was put into a psychiatric institution for conditions that I now know I never had. In fact, it was known then that I did not have those conditions. Despite that, I was diagnosed with numerous severe diagnoses of all sorts of conditions that required me, or they decided that I needed to be on medication to treat. So I took, over the years, 40 different medications over 30 years. Even as I can document now, because I have all my documentation from those years, it was known then that I had no condition and that, in fact, my parents were not healthy themselves, who were also victims of trauma themselves. I can prove this. I know this factually. Do you know what Munchausen syndrome by proxy is? Do you know what that means? So anyone who does not know, it's basically, for my parents, they had their own trauma as young people, and for whatever reason, as I was a child, they had some need to have attention or some need to have their own needs met after not having the love from their families growing up. And they had this obsession, if you will, to have a sick child. I forgive my parents. I don't talk to them. I understand that they did not stay up at night conspiring to cause me problems. They did what they did because they thought that was the best thing that they could do. It's painful. It's debilitating. It's dreadful. It impacts every part of my life, and it will for the rest of my life. However, I'm a survivor. I'm a fighter, and I don't give up. There's so many times. Yeah, come on. We can never give up because I've come this close so many times. And I'm standing here right now shaking. I don't know if you can tell. But we got to do what we have to do. And to be able to talk about this stuff openly, to be able to talk about reality that we can absolutely make our lives better, despite no matter what has happened, no matter what we've been through. As Dan was saying, it is a choice to take steps to make things better. That's exactly what I've done. And I imagine that's what most or everyone here has done as well to get here today. So thank you for that. But I am a survivor, and I intend to always be a survivor, and I intend to always fight and continue on this journey. I spent my teenage years in group homes. I developed gynecomastia. Do you guys know what that is? You may have seen ads on TV for the lawsuits. They don't apply to me, but just to be clear, and I'll try to keep it from being graphic, I developed breasts at age 14 while living in group homes, and I had those growths on my chest for 2.5 years. Even as everyone knew about it and was well aware what was happening, nothing was done. The medication that I was taking for conditions I never had that they knew I never had. And nothing was done. So if you can imagine the destruction to my psyche, how I viewed myself, how I thought about myself, that damage, that self-loathing, that self-hatred has stayed with me until this day. Thankfully, I was able to have surgery to have those growths removed, so my chest might look better now. In my brain, it's still there. I get to work through that every day. That's what I do. And I fight every day to get through that. So for people out there who deal with trauma, we're talking today in this session about life after trauma. From my experience, it's life working through trauma. It's a daily, momentary experience. I have to work through this every day. There's no after trauma for me. It's a daily part of my existence. That's how I live. Are you guys with me here? Right? We live through this. Stuff's going to happen every day, and we have to step up to the plate and fight it. And I'm going to have moments and times in my life where I just get crushed to the ground, and I have to pick myself up and try again. And it is brutally hard, as I think many people here know. We have to do this. It's what I do, even as the past 3 weeks. In order to get here, let me tell you this. In order to get here today, I experienced trauma 3 weeks ago through a work situation. I've since walked away from my job because of an issue at my work. And I was so traumatized to a degree of being out of control in a way that I have not experienced in a very long time. In order to get here today, I had to make sure that I was not, identified as a out-of-control person by, say, providers or the police or someone in my community. So I've spent much of the past 2 weeks staying indoors so I did not find myself in a place that would prevent me to get here today. So that's a real, true experience. I mean, I feel empowered, I feel strong, but the reality is, yesterday, the day before, I had no real understanding if I was going to be able to even get on a plane and get here. So that is the power of recovery. That is the power of fighting through trauma. I made that decision yesterday morning when I woke up to get on the plane to come here. To tell you the truth, I actually didn't think I was going to even make it here. Because up until 3 weeks ago, when things with the trauma in my personal life got to a point of being so unmanageable that I didn't want to be not just here, but breathing at all. And when I was given the honor and privilege to be able to come here 2 months ago, when I was given this honor, and my life was in such chaos that I didn't see in reality that I would actually be standing here today. In fact, what I thought was that, and I'm going to be very honest here and frank, and this is how I do things. I'm really real and genuine, the best of my ability. I thought that yesterday morning was never going to come. And I didn't sleep Monday night because I couldn't imagine what it would mean to have the sun rise. So I woke up, or I should say, I woke up here yesterday morning when the sun rose, and I realized that I was breathing and that what I was going to do was go to the airport and come here. I did not plan on being here. I planned that the way I was going to be heard in the most effective ways, so people would understand my experience, my struggle, who I am. I really believed for weeks and months that the way I was going to be best heard was by not showing up here and people finding out, well, where's Craig Lewis? Oh, something happened. So the reality that I had the dawn approach yesterday morning, and the sun came in. I didn't sleep at all. I sat up playing with Max the cat, thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? How am I going to get on a plane? The last thing I want to do is get on a plane and go do anything. And that's what I was saying at 6 o'clock in the morning yesterday. I had a pint of ice cream for breakfast yesterday, and I went to the airport, and here I am. So, thank you. I mean, So I am liberated. I am free. 5 months ago, I went off all medication, as I said, for years and years taking medication for conditions I never had. It's been a hard process. People, you got to do what you got to do to take care of yourself. No judgment. Take care of yourself. Get the best information about what's available. Be empowered. Ask questions. Do all you can to get the best information to make the best decisions for yourself. Some people take medication, some people don't. I don't care. Do what's right for you. I'm doing what's right for me. I'm happy to be free and liberated. It works for me. But I did spend a life of debilitation, and it was brutal. And I did spend years in poverty, struggling without being able to feed myself, living in the Northeast without heat in the winter, getting arrested, being violent, using drugs, and so many other brutal and painful experiences that I'm sure many people here can relate with as well. But we're not focusing on that. We're focusing on how to get through it, how to make things better, how to continue on with that fight and keep on going. That's what we have to do. That's what I had to do. And there's so many times that I thought I was this close to not being here, this close. And somehow I found it within myself to try again and pull myself together in whatever way I had to, calling a friend, using coping skills, meditating, going for a walk, sleeping, eating, whatever I had to do is what I did. So whatever anyone does to get up in the morning and make it through the day, we've all had experiences of trauma, of pain, of suffering. I don't really care about this diagnosis or this label because we're all people who have been through a living hell of some sort. We wouldn't be sitting here today. So know that. Whatever you do, I'm glad you're here. Even if there's consequences for your actions, I'm glad you're here. I've done all sorts of things that are damaging to my body. I watch people all the time make choices and decisions that many in our society will look at and say, oh, you're bad, or you drank, or you did this. Well, you know what? I look at anybody who does whatever they do to get through that moment as somebody who's already showing their commitment to making their life better. I want to honor that. Whatever you did, whatever you do, whatever the person who comes in through your office door or in your community center, whatever they're doing to get through the day, to get through those moments of pain and suffering, I want to honor that and say thank you to them for showing the commitment to making their lives better, to invest in themselves. Even if other people disagree that's a wrong way to cope or unacceptable or illegal or whatever it is. I am grateful for everybody who steps up to the plate to do whatever they have to do to get through those moments. And what we can do as supporters is help them find other ways that might be less damaging to their lives to make things better. And we have that power to do that because we had that lived experience and that knowledge where we can say, I get it. And this is something you can do that might be less damaging. So you guys with me on this right here? Yeah? All right? All right. We are in a country full of people, many of whom have privilege and situations that allow them to say no to us. I am sick and tired of being told no by people who never earned the right to tell me no. So if you're in a work situation, or you're dealing with a provider or somebody who's saying no, certainly we can appreciate that everyone does the best they can. We can have compassion and empathy. We can choose to not be judgmental. We can understand that everyone has trauma and everyone bases their decisions or what they do based on something they know about the world. It's not for me to say what their experience is right or wrong. Their experience is what it is. So whatever happens with anybody I come in contact with or any interaction, whether we call it good, bad, or otherwise, I want to understand that they're doing the best they can. So in our community, there are problems. In our world, there are problems. And we need to be mindful of the fact that everyone is doing the best they can with what they've got. However, in addition to that, we also have to keep in mind that as that's the case, we also sometimes have to speak up, speak out, and do what's right. And sometimes you have to do what's right, even if it means you walk away from your job like I did 2 weeks ago, coming home in November from my trip to Europe without income. I'm glad I did what I did. I'm not going to share the details of it today because it's not going to be helpful, but I'm glad that I did. I stood up for what was right. I took a lot of you-know-what for it, and I have a lot of pride for what I did because I stood up for somebody who was marginalized. I was shut down for it. You know what? I'm holding my head high because I know I did the right thing. I may not have income, but you know what? I have a lot more right here that's value, that's worth, that's wealth. Because no amount of money and no title and no degree and no position, director, vice president, master's degree, I respect anybody who does what they do. I don't have any of that, and you know what? I am as wealthy as I could ever be. So know that. I will not allow my suffering to be wasted. No way, no how. It does not matter. Certainly there's moments where I just want to give up. Certainly there's moments yesterday when I just wanted to give up. The day before that. I have to find within myself that meaning and purpose. Because the value for me in this world, being a survivor, is that I find meaning and purpose from helping other people get through their struggles. That is what does it for me. You guys with me on this, right? Right? There's meaning and purpose and value in healing ourselves and helping others heal at the same time. We have power. Okay? When we empower other people to make their lives better, we live through them. When we support somebody and help them get through their struggle, and we watch them take their steps forward, they falter, they get back up, we support them, we pull them up, we hold them, we put our arm around them, if you will, and they experience benefits, we live that with them. So anyone in this room, and there's many people here that I know here from years, for a few years of being involved in this wild ride of recovery. So there's people here who have done that for me, including people who have been there for me in the past 2 weeks. And I have said some things that are scary about my own ability to be here. So I know I have to finish up. I'll be given the 1-minute warning. So let me just say, 5 minutes. I missed the cues. It was this and this, and thank goodness. All experiences are necessary. No matter what's happened, if you can take value from it, no matter what's happened, it has educational value. If we choose to find the educational value in our experiences, as terrible, as horrendous as they may be, they also are life-saving and life-changing. The fact that you're sitting here today is evidence that you survived. That is huge. That is massive. That is life-changing. Please know that. I have no regrets for my experiences. Suffering was necessary. I had to go through what I went through to be able to stand here today with you. And you know what? I've done a lot of things that a lot of people don't like. I've said a lot of things that have pissed people off. And I've had people in this world who don't want to deal with me, who don't respect me and don't like me. That's fine. I like me. I try my best. I'm committed to being a good person, to supporting my community, to being fair, non-judgmental, compassionate, empathetic, and understanding of all people, no matter what happens. And I try to give everybody, in a way to really connect with the world and make it right, not just in our community, but in our world at large, to give everybody as much breathing room as possible to just be human. Because we don't know 99% about the person sitting next to us, but what we do know is that they've had experiences that have impacted their lives, that have impacted why and how and what they do. When we know that, we can give them a break. And when we give them that break, it allows for many beautiful things to grow. I've experienced that myself. It's real. Recovery is a choice. When you choose to do something better for yourself, you will see results. Every step you take, everything you do to make things better is a step forward. Honor that in yourself, in each other, and everyone you come in contact with, and the world will become better. In this moment, tomorrow, next year, and in 10 years. Everyone has value. Every single person here has value. Everyone has worth. Everyone is important. The people that come to your office, to your center, wherever you work or wherever you congregate, they have value. Even if they've done something that's pissed you off or upset you or pushed you away or whatever they did, they have value as human beings. They're doing the best they can with what they got. Let's get in their corner and support them and help them grow, because people sometimes don't know, and we can help them know how to take those steps forward. And when we help people do that, their lives improve. And that is a beautiful, beautiful, empowering thing. Everyone here is important. You wouldn't be here today if you didn't care. Am I right? Everyone's here for a reason, right? All right. You may have heard something here today from me that you agree with or you disagree with. Whatever your feelings are, I want to respect them and validate them. Please come talk to me later. If you have any questions, I accept all communications. And anybody who talks to me for any reason will be treated with respect and dignity. So I appreciate criticism. I appreciate people saying, I disagree, I don't like that. Let's communicate, let's talk. When we work together, we all have differences. What do we connect on? And we are in a community of people in recovery dealing with trauma, struggle, mental health struggle, addiction, but we're working to get better. And there are people in the world who are providers and of different titles and facilities and people we go to see for services. They're also doing the best they can. Let's remember that if we don't like what they're saying to us, we don't like how they're treating us, let's try to connect with the one thing that we might have in common. When we connect with those people, even the people in the government or different organizations that we may fundamentally not agree with, let's connect with them on the one thing we can and grow and build. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I want to thank the organizers for having me. It is an honor and privilege to be here. I never thought I'd be here. I never thought I'd see the day that I could stand here and share with you like this. Thank you to all of you. Everyone has value. Everyone's important. Everyone deserves to be respected and treated with love and compassion. Please come speak with me later. I want to talk with all of you. I want to meet everybody. Thank you to everybody. Thank you so much. And keep up the fight.
Good morning, everybody. Dan, Craig, thank you. Yes, there is life after trauma, isn't there? One thing which is really important to me is understanding how we are all connected and trying to find commonality in our experiences, even though we are such diverse individuals. And so I found a video which was really powerful to me, and it helped me to get a better appreciation of just how universal certain experiences are within human life. And I thought perhaps as I speak, instead of looking at me, can check out the video, and I'm going to be doing somewhat of a narration. So if you would pay attention to the video as I talk, I think it might be the best way to go. Okay, so in my early adulthood, when I was labeled with a psychiatric disorder as the reason and the cause of my self-destructive behaviors and extended periods of debilitating depression, I was devastated. I imagined that label meant that for the rest of my life, my behavior would be unpredictable, and I was classified a danger not only to myself, but to everyone around me. And I remember telling my family about this diagnosis and their fearful reaction. But I also remember my daddy, who always said that he wished that I could just be his beautiful little boy again, the one that he always saw when he looked at me. And his words challenged me to begin a journey of discovery, of self-exploration, of understanding myself, so perhaps I could undo whatever it was that had made me become a man with a label. And that journey led me to start asking about my family history, like Dan mentioned, because I heard that there was a historic, perhaps biological, possibly genetic factor to my illness. And what I learned was that my maternal grandmother, whose name no one could remember, used to hear the voice of God. And I didn't understand what that really meant. I didn't understand the problem with that because I grew up in a devoutly Christian household. And so I thought that hearing and obeying the voice of God was perhaps the greatest gift that one could ask for, right? But then it was explained that my grandmother died while she was committed to an asylum. And that was just a bit too confusing for me. I couldn't handle that. So my focus turned a little bit closer, a bit more personal. And I learned that my mother self-medicated herself with phenobarbital until she died. She had severely abused me as a toddler for years in my early childhood. Not my brothers and my sisters, just me. And I'm sure that encoded deep within my cellular memory is the pain of the hot irons on my skin, burning grease being poured in my head, my bones broken and re-broken within days, and the chills that I experienced every time I heard a car's cigarette lighter being released. So there had to be something special about me, something different that caused my own mother to hurt me in particular and not my siblings. Perhaps I was that bad seed. Maybe I reminded her of someone who had did her harm. Maybe I was being punished for sins I committed in a previous lifetime. So I thought that I had my explanation. And this narcissistic, childish belief led me to feel that I was simply unlovable and that I deserved every bad thing that would ever happen to me in life. Everyone would hurt me in some way. And my life was destined to be one of pain, agony, and fear. A regimen of ever-increasing dosages of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors did little to nothing to change this reality for me. And in some ways, the dependency on the medication just reinforced the notion that I could never be well. And I would eventually end up with an untimely death like my grandmother and my mother. So self-medicating myself with street drugs, petty larceny, alcohol, submerging myself into a world of petty crimes and homelessness, well, it just seemed a fitting experience for such a pitiful man that I was destined to become. But then I was informed that I was going to be a father. Now that was unthinkable, that the universe could place another's life in my unworthy hands. No, I was not worthy, and I was very much afraid of being further damned for causing harm to someone else. You see, I was taught by some very well-meaning psychology professors that an abused child would always end up being an abusive parent. So I decided that I would do everything possible to prove that theory wrong. And I became overly cautious, and I watched my daughter as she grew very carefully. And perhaps this is why 23 years later, my daughter simply calls and says, "I love you, Daddy," and all my money just magically disappears. I named my daughter Hope, and I was left to raise her by myself. She depended on me for everything. And of course, that was very scary, because I had also heard that it was impossible to love someone else if you didn't first love yourself. But here was this beautiful, innocent little girl who looked up to me. She needed me, and she called me Daddy, unconditionally loving me. And beginning with her, I learned some very extremely valuable life lessons. Lesson number one was that there was nothing a little kid could ever do that was so bad that they deserved to be abused. So it was not because of me that my own mother behaved the way she did. It was because of something unresolved within herself. Lesson number 2 was that I was actually worthy of being loved. Lesson number 3 was that one possible way to stop the cycle of self-abuse was by being honest, brutally honest, and having the courage to express unafraid and unashamed what I really think and feel. Theodore Reich has said that this is the greatest consolation in life. And so in therapy sessions, I actually had the courage to admit that I was still afraid of my birth mother and anyone whose energy, character, and spirit reminded me of her. I actually hated the memory of my own mother. Now that admission, despite the criticism of others, allowed me the freedom to begin to forgive her, to perhaps free her spirit from the emotional chains that kept me bound to her, like my own personal Jacob Marley from A Christmas Carol. And I learned to eventually love her for being the physical vessel through which I was given life. And I also admitted that I received no hedonistic pleasure from abusing the street drugs. I was self-medicating the symptoms of my major depression so I could just simply get through the day, so I could function. And in many ways, I was repeating a pattern of learned self-abuse and continuing the pain that I was accustomed to. I also began to discover that I'm actually a pretty decent human being. And I did not always have to accept pain and discomfort. And that in those instances where I could not stop the misdeeds of others, I could always use my power to remove myself from harm. I learned that I was generous with my affection and a good care provider. And I learned how to accept love without fear. First from my beautiful daughter, and then from a beautiful, caring woman who's FaceTiming with me right now, who's since become my wife, and from family members who actually found me, and I've become reacquainted with them. Now today, I still experience periods of severe depressive episodes. And I understand that they are simply a part of who I am. They're part of my reality. I accept these episodes because I fully accept who I am. And I know how to take care of myself these days. I know how to take productive actions like staying busy, like doing something productive, like getting out of bed, just that. Yes, taking a shower, yes. Showing up, yes. I know how to pick up the phone and call someone I trust and simply ask them to help me. I've learned how to love and accept myself, and by so doing, I've learned how to love and accept everyone else. So because of my own psychiatric lived experience, I'm much more sensitive to the pain and the discomfort and traumas of others, perhaps with a hyper-empathy. And I allow everyone the time and the space necessary for their own recovery journey. And this sensitivity has been my way of turning a deficit into perhaps a useful asset. And where possible, I'd like to offer an encouraging word to allow others to consider a different way of living. At one time, I was little more than a statistic, a wreck waiting to happen, a genetic predisposition, early childhood trauma, physical abuse by my birth mother, separated from my immediate family, constant disruption of stability by getting shipped from home to home, identity crisis by being adopted, substance abuse, homelessness, criminal justice involved. My God, how could anyone recover from such a life? But here I am. And I'm grateful for a journey that's taken me from being a man labeled with self-despair, lack of motivation, institutionalization, homelessness, and chronic substance abuse, to someone who's now called a husband, a father, a taxpayer, a homeowner, a care provider to multiple plants and pets, a mentor, a peer supporter, a good neighbor, a responsible manager, and a wonderful cook. Today, I know that recovery from severe psychiatric distress is not only possible, but it's absolutely probable with person-centered, individualized, recovery-oriented supports and assistance. And I know this because I am here today, and well, we all start this journey as beautiful little boys and girls full of wonderful potential, don't we? And despite our genetic, experiential, environmental, and cultural diversity, we're all components of this body of humanity. And we're all part of an evolutionary journey to become a universal family that perhaps one day we'll be able to accept the unique gifts and talents that each member that we have can offer. And we can use those unique gifts to benefit the life force of the whole organism. The challenge that I believe we face today is learning how to collaboratively develop the systems of care and eventually the technologies to accurately understand the subtle forces that make us the complex entities that we do grow to become. It's more than trying to simply regulate the chemicals between our ears, and it's more about understanding the positive influence of music, light, and human touch. This may be the next step in our evolution. If we can combine our life experiences with our academic and our professional achievements so we can better understand the infinite threads that unite us, well, I do believe that will be a final creation that would be marvelous. Yes, there will be life after recovery. Thank you.